I'm John,
I'm Rob,
and this is the Mint One podcast.
where we talk all things NFTs and the rise of blockchain gaming.
So Rob, once again, we have a very special guest.
We do. This time it is Layne Lafrance, product co-founder at Flow.
Layne Lafrance, product co-founder at Flow. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much for having me. Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. So, for those that might not know, you have quite a storied history in Web3, I suppose. Not just with Flow currently, but also with CryptoKitties. So, do you want to kind of take us back through your time in the Web3 space and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, folks. Indeed, I'm Layne. I'm now the product co-founder of Flow, but my journey started way back in 2017 when Axiom Zen launched CryptoKitties. And so my journey to blockchain started even a couple years before that, when I had first learned about Bitcoin and was quite taken by trustless payments. And just like a global peer-to-peer payments network was very compelling. And so I'd been watching the industry for quite a while, but didn't was sort of waiting for the right time, the right moment. And the summer of 2017, ICOs were really hot on Ethereum. We were definitely seeing the power of smart contracts. And so I called up Axiom Zen and asked if they were doing anything in crypto. And they said that they certainly were considering it. And if I wanted to join them, that they were sort of thinking about it in the corner. And so I joined that team when they had decided they were going to put cats on the blockchain. An idea that I was 100% bought in on immediately, because people were excited about the space, but they didn't really know what to do with it, and it needed to be concrete. And what better way to make, people love cats. So putting cats on the blockchain was sort of the initial foray into it. There was a number of other projects that myself and the team were contemplating at the time, but obviously CryptoKitties took off, broke Ethereum, and so my role with Flow started back when it was a scaling CryptoKitties problem. So the inception of Flow was addressing scaling CryptoKitties to more users, because that's what they were asking for when we were first launching the project. And so my job was to scale CryptoKitties, and ultimately the answer to that question became building. It became something we swore it wouldn't be, which is building our own blockchain. But that was indeed the answer that we landed on. And so that is how I find myself the co-founder of Flow.
It's funny, isn't it? So I joined the space. I was looking at the space in late 2017, and then I started working in it in early 2018. And there were so many strange problems because of Ethereum. We wanted to do a gaming giveaway in 2018, and we were working sort of on and off with Engine. And a game on Engine sent us some NFTs to give away. And then we had the problem that if we were to send people the NFTs, it was going to cost us $200 per NFT we gave away. It was insane, the problems back then. But then there was as you say, there was so much excitement in the space. People knew what we had. We just couldn't quite figure out, how to get it over the line. For anyone that perhaps doesn't know, how did CryptoKitties break Ethereum? And how did Flow solve that?
Yeah, great question. So it broke it. There were sort of three ways that the network was overwhelmed. Two of which were sort of what you were referring to, which is it was prohibitively expensive to, on Ethereum, send anything to users. So the user acquisition cost was insane, both because gas was really high. It was expensive. For folks who maybe aren't, I think your listeners are probably familiar with gas. I'm not going to go into this detail, but
sure.
Basically paying for transactions to be on the network was expensive. And the demand model of Ethereum was, if there's a lot of demand for it, price it higher, very makes sense. It's basic economics, but It meant that people in times of high demand were very quickly being priced out. And so CryptoKitties sort of first fold broke Ethereum practically, because it made it prohibitively expensive for a user who was trying to spend something like $20 on a cat to do so, because the transaction fees were, like you said, on the order of $200. And so it just didn't make any sense. And so practically, when there was a lot of interest from CryptoKitties, it bid demand up for processing transactions, such that it was prohibitive for people to have a reasonable experience at a reasonable price point. The second sort of layer of CryptoKitties breaking Ethereum was like actually technically. And so just like the volume of traffic that hit the network was too much both for the node software to process at the time. So like Geth nodes just weren't dealing with that level of traffic prior to CryptoKitties. And so there was just like some sort of basic rate limiting stuff that we needed to do on our side as best we could at sort of like an app layer. And there was also a collaboration that needed to happen to just sort of help the nodes that were processing the transactions entering the network to manage this level of volume. And so we ended up building a tool called the water hose, and that sort of helped manage traffic such that the nodes weren't totally overwhelmed. So those were sort of the big prongs of CryptoKitties breaking Ethereum. But I think the most important thing, or the thing that we received the most sort of complaints about, was just the space that it was taking up on the network. So people felt pretty strongly that so you know, a global computer for everyone to use and everyone to access the state of is a very valuable resource, and the state that you decide to put in the resource that everyone shares, there was sort of, I guess, an implicit promise at the time from the community that it would be things they all agreed on. And that was like important sort of DeFi applications, funding for different projects. And here we were with our like silly cat game, and they're like, guys, like, what the heck? We have serious financial applications that work here. And, you know, like, they're doing ICO drops. And so it's like legitimacy of that versus our cat was like contestable. But the point was valid, right? Like the community felt strongly that it was being used for something other than its sort of intended purpose, and there wasn't a way for the technology to support that distinction, for there to be this large state space that could either do both or sort of prioritize them in the way that the community felt was needed, because there was only one rudimentary rate limiting thing, and it was gas. And so gas was just practically too expensive, and the network was entirely overwhelmed. It is basically how CryptoKitties broke Ethereum. And then I guess to answer the second part of your question, how Flow addressed that was reconsider the size of the state space that needed to be shared, just at like a very fundamental level. On typical single node blockchains, that's limited by how much work or state a single node can use, but Flow has this very neat separation of concerns thing where we sort of like in economics, how you specialize tasks, we divide up the work that the nodes are doing between performing performance and security tasks, and we do it with a sort of minimum viable number of nodes so as to always preserve decentralization. And that led to a full step function improvement. That specialization of tasks increased the throughput of Flow at a performance level in a way that the Ethereum architecture wouldn't, and gave us a really large scalable state space to add more complex logic such that the apps that before were competing there could coexist on Flow without sort of limiting the experience of either set of users. And then the gas problem, it was the other sort of major thing that Flow thought a lot about, and it actually breaks down to two problems, not just how expensive gas and processing transactions is, but also who's allowed to pay for them. And so we, as you were describing with your project, right, you're trying to pay these user acquisition costs, and like maybe $200 is fine. Maybe you would have paid it because you just wanted the users, but you didn't even, there was no functionality for you to be able to submit a transaction on user's behalf, right? Like the custody model of the keys is such that the user's in complete control always, but that also means that there's no room for a service provider to help them. And that's kind of impractical. Like in practice, I think we all work with service providers all the time and sort of extend the trust relationship to get a better experience. And so on Flow, we made it such that transactions can be signed and paid for by different parties. So it can be the case that the user authorizes the transaction, but the dApp pays for it. And that just like totally opens up the flexibility of the kinds of transactions you're able to process, because the user is able to engage at the level that they want to, which is like, is this action okay for me or not? And the dApp gets to engage at the user at level that they want to, which is just improve the user experience by paying for the transactions and helping to propose them and form them and that sort of thing. So both the problems that CryptoKitties saw with breaking Ethereum and the problems that you were seeing, Robert, when you were launching your project, Flow went back and designed those natively by making it possible for other people to sign and pay for transactions, as well as just reducing transaction fees overall and setting a more predictable price scheme than strictly demand-based. And that's sort of a two-tier pricing scheme that I won't go into the details of now because it's probably not interesting for folks. I'm happy to give you a follow-up if you're ever interested in two-tier pricing and how we keep fees predictable.
Well, I think that segues us nicely into talking about onboarding, which is always one of the biggest topics, especially right now in the Web3 space. We've seen kind of a steady flow of larger brands come into Web3. It was actually a project on Flow that got me into Web3 space with NBA Top Shots. Of course, you have quite a lot of major IPs. You've got NBA, NFL, UFC, etc. A lot of sports-focused ones as well. So in 2023, as so many people tend to be pointing towards, okay, how do we acquire a mainstream audience, and how do we get the public's attention into why Web3 could be beneficial to them? How important do you think having big sports franchises on board is in helping to drive mass market adoption? And do you think we're starting to see a shift in the makeup of the community from these diehard crypto folk who are very knowledgeable about the technology and protocols, etc., to kind of just general public and people that want to enjoy the benefits but don't necessarily need or want to know from a technical level how it all works?
So certainly I would say it's important for mainstream folks to come into the space, but that's really secondary to the more central thing, which is designing products that, first of all, obfuscate the need for all the technical knowledge that you just named, because it's cool that people know that, but there's, innovation is abstracting away layers of complexity. And so I definitely don't think that we sort of hit a critical mass of talent that understands that stuff. And so now we get to do the much more interesting thing, which is design products that showcase why Web3 is 100x better than any other internet experience that you'll have. I think it really comes down to it. Like, it's not enough for it just to be major sports leagues. People are not going to come to Web3 because it's like something to try. They're going to come to Web3 if and only if it changes their life. And that's literally the bar. Like, the switching costs are in some ways significant. And I think Flow thinks a lot about making onboarding so seamless and so intuitive and so similar to what you expect in Web 2, with Google Auth and just log in with services that you expect. But you're not going to log into services unless they are awesome. You're going to log in because the experience is truly compelling. And so it's not enough for it to be a sports product with Google login. That doesn't make a product. That's just something. What it needs to be is an experience that changes the relationship with the game or with the team or with the community of people around it. It needs to truly extend the experience that you would have otherwise had when you were just watching it. What we have right now for what we do right now is good enough. And that's the honest truth of it. We watch it on TV. We talk to our friends about it. We go to the game. So what are you going to do that changes my life? What are you going to do that makes it so much better that I would never consider having a fan experience with any team that wasn't supporting Web3 and wasn't giving me that experience on Flow? And to sort of concretify that, it's really strong, compelling loyalty programs that do follow your relationship among all of your interactions with the team, that really reward you for that engagement and loyalty. People are asking for more stuff like that. We want real connection, we want real experiences, we want things that are fun that we can bring our friends to, and the best experiences are gonna push that forward. You guys did a really great piece recently on the metaverse, and I love that you were challenging that's a totally meaningless term. And the metaverse is about sort of it's a quality of a variety of experiences. It's not a place that we go. And I think that's really the truth of it. So definitely sports leagues being involved is helpful for exposure, but it has to be matched with equal innovation. I think some of the best leagues are absolutely coming to Flow because they're truly innovating not only in fan engagement, but in their sport. These are leagues that are excited about how the nature of things unfolds. And so bringing that essence to innovating the fan experience, I think absolutely is critical to mainstream adoption. And I'm so happy that we have these leagues because of that. But it's, like eyeballs is not enough, I guess is my point. Like it is not enough to just have a lot of people who might be interested. It needs to be people who might be interested and then are absolutely interested, are so excited, want to tell everybody in their life about this thing that they've experienced that they couldn't have experienced before. And so to me, that's the bar for mainstream adoption. That's the thing that we have to always push for, because making onboarding seamless to an experience you don't care about doesn't matter. It has to be seamless onboarding to something that you're dying to do. And so I think that's the challenge.
You touched on about 9 things I want to follow up on, but so I'm going to try and pick one to start. Incidentally, one of my favorite pieces I've ever written on Web3 was about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was inspired by Top Shots. And I had just this clarifying moment where I realized that what Top Shots is doing, or could do, is it's creating digital sports memorabilia. And traditional sports memorabilia has been wonderful for 200 years at this point, and people love owning these parts of moments. And what Top Shots does is it gives you the full moment. And I just want to get your opinion on whether you think digital sports memorabilia, if I can call it that, can compete with traditional sports memorabilia. Is it in the same sort of realm? Because that really does enhance the fan experience. If you're I've been at some great games and in lots of different sports, and you see this amazing moment. If you could, I would gladly go back and be like, I can't wait until this is on Top Shots. I'm going to buy that moment. Do you think that can compete? Because I feel like it maybe can, but it's obviously complex.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't use the word compete only because I think it's entirely additive to it. Like I think there will always be a place for physical memorabilia, but digital memorabilia adds a layer of it adds a dimension that didn't exist before. Like it lets you, like own a moment that you saw in a game when you were actually in the game and you want to look for it later. It lets you attach maybe like a signature from the player saying that you were at the game with them, and maybe it gives you tickets or like enter to a draw for the next set of tickets for the same, like the next time those players are going to come up against each other again or something. Like I don't think it competes with, you're always going to want the basketball at the game, you're always going to want the jersey at the game, but having the jersey on yourself and an avatar like that represents your digital self, and there being this digital expression of a physical you with these items that you really care about and really identify with, like that's so additive. So I don't think it needs to compete. I don't know if it certainly would be a sort of value add in the traditional business lens of like, but you're kind of competing for dollars, and it's like, well, yeah, but I think more dollars also become available when you're like really extending people's experience and increasing the odds, sort of like that loyalty program story again, where you're increasing the odds of them having a great experience next time. And so the value to them is such that it makes sense for them to spend a little bit more money on these sort of digital and physically paired moments that, just like really extend the fan experience and memorabilia. So 100%, I think you're right. It could come up against physical memorabilia, but I think only in an additive way.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Just to touch back on Web3 being able to provide these life-changing experiences. By the way, I completely agree. I think we need to get to a stage where what we provide with Web3 is so fundamentally better than what else is out there that it becomes a no-brainer for people to jump across. But with what's currently available in the Web3 industry, what platform do you think will provide that life-changing experience? Will it be games? Will it be tickets? Will it be collectibles, as Rob has kind of tangentially touched on there? Could it be art? I mean, what kind of sector of NFTs do you think would be the first one to really break through into a wider market?
Oh, good question. Well, I have to disclaimer my answer by saying that I have never claimed to know the answer to this question, so much so that we specifically built Flow to be a very general purpose blockchain, because in even the designing of CryptoKitties and like figuring out what we were first going to build, there's so many places that public blockchains help, but identifying the exact place where they truly 100x the experience and people never look back on that specific use case is, I can't see I would not claim to know the answer. I think that's going to be like a very interesting question that is answered just by people trying stuff. And so I guess I'll tell you the areas that I'm excited about people trying things in, because I think they might be onto something.
Sure.
Traditionally we see games as people's entry point to understanding how to use something, but it's not we didn't start using mobile phones to play games, right? Like mobile games on our phones were a helpful way for us to figure out how to use like T9 and like other like features on our phone, and get good with like cursors and stuff. But it really wasn't, you didn't, even though games are a really important part of adoption for mobile phones, I don't think that's the reason that we started using mobile phones. We started using mobile phones because we could talk to people anywhere that we were, right? That was the killer feature. You could talk to anybody anywhere and it fit in your pocket. And so Web3's equivalent moment, based on how well it facilitates peer-to-peer transactions, especially with peers that you maybe don't trust, in lots of markets around the world, makes me think something related to tourism, like a reframe of peer-to-peer Airbnb, of like peer-to-peer Uber, verified algorithms. Like those things are search marketplaces, right? Like they're just different filters on search marketplaces. And increasingly, I think the drivers and service providers, as well as the users, are asking for some transparency in the algorithms that are being used, because we're all paying and the people who are doing the work don't seem to be making the money that we're paying. And we're all kind of looking at ourselves, scratching our heads, being like, is this another man in the middle problem? I thought they said they were going to solve that one.
Yeah.
And so something like a place where global payments are interesting and where peer-to-peer markets shine, I think is there's something there. The digital expression universe, like establishing your digital identity, establishing your identity in general is something I think people are thinking a lot more so about than ever since COVID, but especially establishing your digital identity is quite interesting. And it's something that kids are doing a lot more because it's sort of a safe way for them to pseudonymously interact with their peers, but like in a way where they're not putting their own face online. And the notion of like we're doubling down on avatars, right? Like we all have our digital selves, and that's increasingly the case. And so I am very excited about Doodles on Flow. They are really tapping into this like digital self-expression thing and bringing, to your point, Robert, about merch and like, will this be something that, that people like, will memorabilia and merch be something that people get excited about? I think absolutely, because it's something that we are increasingly wanting to put online on our digital, not just our physical selves. And so digital expression and identity, especially around fashion, will probably be a very interesting one. It's also like a very nice evolution on existing PFP projects. And it's something that that use case of like building out your identity with accessories or skills, those were like very early founding sort of principles when we were designing Flow, because that composing of, in real life, NFTs are like objects, and in real life you put objects in the bag, and then the bag goes in your car, and then the car goes to a place. There's like layers of NFTs, and we'll certainly see that replicate itself in the digital world, the metaverse, Web3 world, if you will. And so, yeah, just the ability for the code and the platform to like naturally extend to these layers of NFTs, I think will be really important, because we're going to see more and more of that layering to add utility, to add meaning, to build out these ecosystems. And so anywhere that folks are like trying to add value to existing projects, especially around digital expression, I think will be very interesting.
Yeah, we speak a lot about utility within NFTs, because it feels the natural progression of NFTs and where the real value is. In fact, I've just finished an article for NFT Insider on that very subject about the importance of NFTs to art is quite high, but the importance importance of art to NFTs is not as high as people think it is, and it's actually utility. Other than NFTs, one of the areas that I think was a real success point for Flow was your onboarding of developers. Is that still a priority, or are you trying to split that with getting users, or how's that dynamic working?
Well, thank you very much. And it's, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because to me, the only priority we've ever had is onboarding users, and we've taken the mentality that the best developers, and when I say best, I guess I just mean most entrepreneurial developers, which is sort of who you need in an ecosystem at this stage. The most entrepreneurial developers will show up when there are people to serve. And so as a product person, what I was always petitioning for is like, help your user solve it. Like, your user has users when you're serving developers. And so make sure that our metric is their end metric. Like, when their job is to get users because they're building their own projects and they have their own ideas, our job is just to make sure that they are able to do that. So we took their metric as our metric, which was, how do we get people in here and excited about this stuff, and how do we help developers do more of it? And that approach seems to be the thing that got developers excited. Like, it seems like that framing indeed of like, don't worry, you guys do what you're good at, and we're gonna do what we can do to get like interest and excitement around these precedent changing and paradigm shifting opportunities, and turns out they love it. And it certainly wasn't the developer onboarding for everyone. It's sort of a trial by fire thing, which is like, just come have users and like do awesome stuff with them. But for the folks that it did work for, it worked really well.
Very cool. I think something I'll touch on real quick is one of our one question we ask all of our guests that come onto the podcast, and I'll tweak it slightly for this conversation. So the question is, what is the biggest problem in blockchain / the Web3 space, and how do we as an industry solve it? And the way I'll change that is just tack on to the end there. How is Flow contributing towards solving that problem?
Great question. The maybe unpopular opinion, I think the biggest problem in blockchain is obscurity. And what I mean by that is that we as an industry have gone very far into the intellectual pursuit of the implications of these systems. And I think we are now all having to like dial it back and say concretely, what is this going to do to change people's lives tomorrow? And so for me, the big problem in the industry is just something that I also, is hard. Something I challenge myself to do every day, which is like really delivering 100x improvements to real people every single day. I used to have this like little adage sort of thing. I'd say real benefits to real people always. And that is the challenge. Like if we're going to build an industry that people shift their entire lives to, if we're going to build a category of products that treats people's rights and value and respects their ownership differently, it's going to need to be 100 to 1,000x improvement better than what they're currently seeing. And they're going to need to love it, and their friends are going to need to be there, and they're going to need to find what they need. And that's a pretty high bar, but it's one that we certainly have to keep pushing ourselves to hit. And I think there's been a number of like example projects on Flow that have really shown what it means to give people something they never had before. Like in the Top Shot Moments example that we were talking about before, you didn't get to own a moment of a game that way before, and that did mean something to fans. There are without going into like too many details, because I know we're running up on time, the ecosystem projects that are really pushing what their own communities will be able to do with products after, like to use Doodles as an example again, and Genies is another great one for this. The ability for communities to come in and collaborate on top of these core resources they make, like the Genies SDK, you can add additional fashion items to their set and make them available. That's a new creative model that like creators are the next really significant contributors to the economy we're seeing, and that's an entirely new avenue of creation for them to tap into and actually get compensated for. So I think, our challenge just really is like make something possible that wasn't possible before, and do it in a way that people are really excited about and want to stick around for and tell their friends about. And so Flow is trying to solve that problem by just standardizing all the simple stuff, standardizing the things that make it hard in other places, make it easy for you to have a great seamless user onboarding experience, make it easy for you to respect their rights and let them transition from not knowing anything about, but most people come in not knowing things about blockchain, and then they know more. Make it easy for them to go from not knowing anything to knowing more, and then taking over their rights and their keys and their control when they're ready to do so, like after they've had a chance to build a relationship with the product and the thing that they're excited about, but not, imposing that choice on them at the very beginning, being like, do you want to hold your seed phrase? And people being like, I didn't know we were planting trees. What are you talking about? Like, it's just hectic. So yeah, Flow is just like really contributing, I think, by standardizing the sticky spots that kind of get people caught up so that developers can tap into best in class there, and then just like making a lot of room for people to innovate in 100x areas, because I think that's ultimately what it'll really take to get certainly, more of my friends on board. And that's a problem that lots of us in the industry think about a lot.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned there has become a bit of a hallmark that I hunt for when I look at a new project or any new ecosystem that's cropping up is what their approach is to creators and how they're looking to empower them. It's been, the creator economy has been something that people say a lot, but not many people necessarily move towards it. I have a completely unrelated question to that, and it's a slightly more techie question because we haven't had any techie questions. There's one thing I was a little bit confused about when I was looking through Flow. Now, transactions per second aren't necessarily a very good metric to measure blockchains by, but Flow's kind of stood out. So it says it's 100 TPS, which seems to me is either very low or very conservative as an estimate. I know a lot of them are theoretical. People quote 60,000, 100,000, and it's theoretical. So I wanted to ask if you could explain a little bit why it's 100 TPS, and could this be a blocker for Flow's scaling going forward?
So Grant and I are definitely going to need to follow up with you on the exact methodology of how that number's come up with.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But the what I can say is that we are very scientific about the metrics that we share, and what I mean by that is we'll only cite numbers that have been observed, like to statistical significance over a period of time, basically. And so they're basically like Flow supports a really significant load when projects are doing drops and stuff. But they're, as we've seen in the last year, the number of drops has overall dropped, and so there's sort of this like spike in activity, and then we're taking the average over a little while.
Right. Okay.
Happening, and so
we
do have the Flow team, the Flow core team does benchmark against a not live, like sort of on a simulated network, basically. But it's just simulated load, and so there we're getting numbers that are like comparable, competitive step function improvements over the ones that you're seeing quoted by other chains. And that's probably the numbers they're using, but we feel very strongly about citing numbers that we have actually supported at load, at user scale, over time, sustainably, reliably, and all of those things. So it's it's a very conservative number because it's one of the numbers that is sort of very publicly observable and would be like the average over a series of multiple drops or something like that. But when you actually look at the graphs, the activity is much more spiky, and so that also results in sort of a leveling. But Grant and I can certainly follow up with you on the exact methodology that the team used when they came up with the most recent number.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Cool. But I'm not a techie guy, or at least in the Web3 space. I think away from it I am. But so I'm going to take the next question in a different direction here. And I want to move more generally onto the state of the space in general right now. We're not getting the same level of exposure in the industry as we were doing kind of late 2021, but there's an awful lot of institutional investment. There's so many developers in the space. And from a regulatory point of view, there's a lot going on, both here in the UK, across in the US, in Europe as well. Obviously, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank had an impact on the industry. Could you give me your thoughts on where we are in the Web3 industry in 2023, what progress have we made since, for example, I came into the industry in 21, and since Rob came in a few years before that, and what changes have you seen since you first came into this blockchain space?
No, it's sort of everything's changed and everything's stayed the same a little bit. I think the biggest changes are that we're having more legitimate conversations about it now. So the regulatory interest is actually great news. It legitimizes the space. It ensures that there are standards for treating users well, which unfortunately weren't being respected by, as it turns out, a couple of projects in the space. And we don't need to name any names. I think folks probably know who we're referring to, and if not, we can do a whole separate bit on that. But the bottom line is standards do need to be set, and products that are complex, that are, well, I guess needlessly complex, they shouldn't be complex. Like, things need to be made clear to users, and they need to know what they're signing up for. And if they're going to lose money, they need to know, and they need to know why. And I think regulation is really pushing that level of just sort of table stakes of making sure that people do have a good experience here, because it is unacceptable for people to lose their life savings. And, we can argue about whether or not whose fault that is. And, they made all their choices, but the fiduciary responsibility of the industry, of regulators, is to ensure that people, by and large, are by default able to have a safe experience. And so I think it's that happening, where we're definitely seeing that happen more so now. I think we're much closer than we've been previously to good guidelines about what that looks like. The quality of questions that we're getting from regulatory bodies is still probably not at the level that I think the industry would hope to hear. The questions are improving over time. I think there's probably still a little bit of sense of guys, this is a fundamental technology. It's really important. We all of us agree that this is an important technical improvement. We're just figuring out how to do it, not whether or not if we should do it. We as a group agree that if it's possible, and it indeed seems to be, then it's really important that we do this, and we just need to figure out the safest way to do that. So, the industry has had its ups and downs. I think I've lived through something like there's been 4 major downturns in the time that I've been in crypto. 4 times at least in the time since I've been in crypto, people have screamed from the top of mountains that crypto is dead. And of course, that's never turned out to be true. This is just sort of the hype and fall of cycles that we see. And so my stance on this is the same as it's always been. Crypto's here to stay, and how we do that and how we show its benefit to people in their lives is really the challenge. And as long as we stay focused on, we as an industry, we have the Flow core team, as long as we stay focused on delivering real benefits to real people always, you don't go wrong. I really believe that. I think innovation is the heart, necessity is the heart of innovation. There's clearly a necessity for products like this, public blockchains, when we see what happens when centralized groups, both in traditional finance, as you were alluding to, that capital coming in, and there being some challenges with sort of smaller, big banks with maybe smaller institutional money, having central control over that, as well as the crypto industry. There being, still cracks in what it means to be both a trustless, decentralized system and one that respects users' rights and adheres to regulation. So there's certainly gaps to be filled. Regulation will do it, great product teams will do it, and our challenge is just to keep doing the best work we can to serve people. And I think that gets you through any landscape, regardless, bull or bear market. It doesn't matter if people need your product at the end of the day, because you're really helping their lives. So for me, that's sort of the way to level out all of the ups and downs, because crypto's dead every other day. I try not to fall into too much of the cyclicality of it.
Yeah, but I feel that. I can't imagine the headaches you have to go through at Flow, running a blockchain and an entire ecosystem when it comes to regulations, even the small things we do, we have run into myriad issues where we've had to go seek someone's help who's an expert on this and that, and it's all pretty stressful. So I have 3 questions left I want to ask. I am conscious of time. We are running out of it, and these questions couldn't come up organically, so I'm going to just stuff them in at the end of the podcast. The first one is, I know you guys were looking at partnering with the Premier League, soccer, football, and it didn't seem to happen, and people were kind of pitching it like it was you guys versus So Rare, which didn't seem to make much sense to me, given you had 2 different uses of a partnership with the Premier League. Is it something that could still happen? I mean, you got La Liga, so I'm really hoping you do.
I mean, I don't think anything is out of the realm of possibility. Usually so personally, I wasn't involved in those conversations, so unfortunately I can't comment on the exact state of it, but I would certainly say that in general, everything is always open for discussion, and typically we really prioritize the Flow team, the Flow core team, Flow as a project. The companies that have really hit big on Flow, including Dapper Labs, among many, all really appreciate the importance of timing, is what I'll say here. So it might not have been the right time for Premier League, and getting the chance to showcase what's possible here for soccer fans with the Liga will be, like an important proving ground, most likely. And I think we're excited to do that. And often it's the case that finding one partner that is just really gels, and that you can go deep on a really specific vertical and really showcase that 100x improvement I keep referring to, like we were able to do with the NBA on Top Shot. I think that's sort of the priority, and so certainly it's still within, I'm sure it's within the realm of possibility. I would love to have them, but as of right now, I don't know exactly the state of that, unfortunately.
Sure.
So, and Grant might be
That's okay.
more details, but everything is possible, and we'd love to have them.
Well, hopefully you manage that. The other question is, I've seen Google are doing more and more in the space, which was inevitable, really. I saw a long time ago, I saw Google and Flow partnered on various things. Is that still active? Are you still working with Google? I haven't seen much lately on it.
Yeah, great question. Actually, I think this is perfect, because now we can follow up with the what's up with Google official statement, because I think that's coming out quick here, Grant. But I will say that Google definitely is running nodes for Flow, so GCP is a significant supporter of the actual blockchain. I think we've been talking a lot about sort of tapping into their developer ecosystem, because building out more of a developer experience around Web3 with best-in-class technology is something they're thinking about. And I recently have been talking about collaborating with them, but nothing to share publicly yet. I think that would be a really great follow-up, and when there is something official to share, you'll certainly be the first to know. But I can say definitively, yes, Google is still very much involved in working on Flow, and we're really happy to have them.
Amazing. Okay. The final question, I think, is kind of a softball, but you've earned it. Is Flow looking at attracting Web3 games still? I see a lot of blockchains really pushing Web3 gaming. I don't feel like I've seen as much from Flow, but as you say, you're kind of the Swiss Army knife blockchain with a lot of different angles. So is it something you're looking at still?
Yeah, absolutely. Games are definitely something that we're looking at, because like I said, big part of adopting mobile helps people understand them. Helps people understand new platforms, fun places, and good context for people to experience things that are kind of new to them. So definitely Flow is interested in gaming. Cadence is really, as a programming language, is flexible enough to support more complex game logic. And that was a huge part of the reason, actually, we developed our own programming language. We had tried to do our own games after CryptoKitties and sort of the breeding algorithm. Ethereum, including this sort of simple rock, paper, scissors dynamic, which ended up being the very top bar. That was the most complexity we were ever going to get into a Solidity smart contract on Ethereum. And it was a very simple game. It was literally rock, paper, scissors. So ensuring that the programming language and the platform were able to support gaming was that has been a driving use case since day one, because it's such an important part of adoption. And we definitely are working with the best game studios that are thinking about what game logic is interesting to put on chain, what part of our in-game economies can we sort of translate there and set best-in-class standards for in-game economies, and where the overlap of those two things come together when they're like, both doing best practices here on users owning their stuff and pushing the verifiability of game logic and the ability for communities to extend game logic and world building, really prioritizing them. But that's a high bar for game developers, and so I think we are, there's definitely folks building games. We're excited to have more people building games, especially people who are pushing the boundaries, and it's totally native to what Flow is designed for: complex game environments and more complex logic with cadence.
Amazing. It's great to hear. It shuffles us quite nicely into what I think will be our final question. We touched earlier on the number of developers that are looking at blockchain and Web3, more now so than ever before. And there's so many different chains for them to build on. So for any developers that are out there, and we know we have a few that listen to this podcast, why should they choose Flow?
Oh, great question. So glad you asked. So Flow is for devs that care about scale, security, and adoption as table stakes. And I think I'll do. Where Flow really shines and is special is being designed for composability. And this goes to Robert's point about having a creator strategy. Really designing products that creative communities can tap into, leverage, and add value to is so important. It's so compelling. I think it'll really drive the currency of the internet is content, and the ability for content and content creators to really evolve and generate value will be really important. So composability, that ability for smart contracts to interact with each other and to develop into very complex environments for their communities, very compelling if you're a developer thinking about the innovation of not just a single product, but an entire community and ecosystem around your product, then you want to look at Flow. And the other place where Flow really shines and sets itself apart is the ownership model and having a programming language that really is designed for value. So the Flow account model, different to Ethereum or other EVM-based chains, doesn't map to it's not the case that your stuff is held in a smart contract run by a dApp that points to your account. It is instead the case that your account truly holds ownership and custody over all of those assets, that your keys control ownership and access to those assets, and smart contracts ask for access. And this is, the Ethereum community is like sort of starting to come at this from a different angle with account abstraction. But that was something that we built in layer one for Flow, this idea that your accounts and assets were really yours to own. And that enables your account to move much more seamlessly through the ecosystem with you. It enables that composability thing that I was talking about. And it also ensures that developers can write complex value-based logic in your account and support it for users without compromising security or doing anything strange. So the big things on Flow, really like that scale for mainstream, which was proven with the millions of users on Top Shot, security made inherent by a programming language that's designed to manage value, and mainstream adoption, which is just like that real commitment to sharing best-in-class standards and practices so developers can innovate in that area of composability and innovate new and interesting things on top of what's currently possible. So developers who are looking to tap into an ecosystem should definitely be looking at Flow.
Absolutely. There we go. Layne, thank you very much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation on a whole range of topics. Again, pleasure to speak with you. And I think we'll call it there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Really great to meet you both, Robert and John. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
You
Layne.
too.
Take care.
So there we go, Layne Lafrance from Flow. Thank you very much for joining us. As I said, it was a fascinating chat. Very detailed, very in-depth. Someone with a real fundamental understanding of the space, and not just from the technical level on how it all works, but also the part it can play in our future and how we may be able to get there. And I think we've delved into that more in this interview than we have probably any other guest we've had on the pod. So yeah, it was great to have that chat.
Yeah, that was kind of a macro level chat, but Layne has a very that sort of quiet confidence you get when you've been in something for so long, working on something for so long that you just know inside out, and you could tell she knows her stuff, and that's very interesting. Some of the questions I thought, oh, is that a bit weak? That question, is there enough meat on the bones to get a good answer? But I mean, Layne got every morsel of meat off those bones, because that was very interesting chat.
Yeah, superb. Well, I guess that is it for episode 63 of the Mint One podcast. As we always do, Rob, where can we find you?
You can find me at tokengamer.io for the daily blockchain gaming news and things all related to the metaverse and gaming and anything financial and all sorts. I cover all sorts, always sort of linked to gaming in some capacity. And then you've got our app, which is the Token Gamer app on iOS and Android. You can read the articles in the app, and you can also check out your Wax NFTs, tokens, and your Polygon NFTs and tokens. That is now live. So please give that a test and let me know what your thoughts are. We're using LinkedIn a lot. I think I mentioned that last time. Find us on LinkedIn and add me as well. Say hello to me. I don't have enough people saying hello to me day to day. I'm in a very small office outside my own house, so I don't see people. I think that's everything. John, what about you? Where can people find you?
Well, I think just to touch on the companion point of view, I think the only companions I have are that hat and that pillow with the Bored Ape on it. So
yeah,
I don't know whether
the McCain Oven Chips hoodie. that is a good friend of mine. It hangs just off camera.
Well, there we go. We're both just sat in quiet offices on our own talking about Web3 all day. But there we go.
That's the future.
Absolutely. For all things Web3 gaming, NFTs, all that good stuff, it's nftinsider.io or nftinsider_io on our socials. We are so close to 50k followers on Twitter, so if you're not already following us, do us a favour and head over there and go do that. That'd be great. For me personally, it's at Hydropowered on pretty much everything. Twitter is the best one. I've changed my profile picture to my Shadow Wolf from the Cool Cats collection. So there we go.
Say that sentence to an elderly person, please. I would like.
Yeah, I don't think I'll take you up on that. Explain what is a Shadow Wolf? What is a Cool Cat? What is a PFP?
There's
probably
many,
what Twitter
many
is.
things. Yeah, I mean that would bamboozle. I think anyone over. Oh no, we're not going to be ageist here. my granddad was very good with tech. To be fair,
Yeah. But there we go. Twitter's the best one for me. Pop on over there, say GM, do all that good stuff.
Yes.
Do you not like GMs?
You know how much I hate GM. Did I tell you someone applied to a job at Token Gamer and he messaged me GM at the start of his application, and I was like, look, I know this is Web3 and I'm probably meant to be endeared by that, but I'm not even reading your
You
CV.
might not get brownie points with Rob, but you will get brownie points with me.
Exactly. Just take all your GMs and give them to John.
I'd be more than happy to receive them. But there we go, episode 36. 36? 63. I got the numbers the wrong way around. Wow, that's an incredible mistake to make. Episode 63 of the Mint One podcast with the product co-founder of Flow, Layne Lafrance. We've got more guests coming up, but I guess you'll have to wait and see who
exciting
they
ones
are.
as well.
So, absolutely. But for now, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, share it around, leave us a comment who you'd want us to see speak to with.
You alright?
Whichever one of those is correct. Next. If it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, 5-star podcast review would be fantastic. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at Mint1Pod. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, everybody. And we hope you tune in again next week.